Hello everyone, good morning and good afternoon depending on where you are coming to us from. So welcome to today's webinar. I have Perry from Tampere University of Applied Sciences, and today we're going to be talking about how have they grown their international student community. So it's just gone 10, so we'll have a few people trickling in, but just before we kick off, we've got a kind of few kind of house rules before we start. So obviously I have a lot of questions for Perry. I'm going to be kind of grilling her lots of questions on kind of their experience over the last year and their experience with Unibuddy and kind of plans for beyond, but we would also love your questions as well. So please do send your questions in to the Q&A function. We'd love to address some of those at the end. Also, if you've got any kind of general chit chat comments that you want to have with other participants, you can use the chat box. And of course, as with all our webinars, we'll be providing a recording after we're finished. So quick introduction. So my name's Sophie. I'm one of the university partnership managers at Unibuddy, and I primarily look after the Nordic region. So kind of building new relationships and partnerships with higher ed institution across the Nordics. And I've been at Unibuddy just over a year. So having a really good experience in higher ed after kind of varied career of kind of working across tech and healthcare. So I'm going to pass it over to Perry as well, just to quickly introduce herself.
Okay, so my name is Piri Hiltunen and I work at Tampere University of Applied Sciences. Been there for ages, I'd say about 25 years. But I used to work with international mobility for the first 20, and then for the past 5 years, I've been working with international marketing of our degree programs and individual student recruitment, tuition fees, scholarships, anything related to that. One of the important parts of marketing, of course, is student ambassadors, and that's where Unibuddy comes in.
Amazing, thank you. Sorry, I've just seen a comment to say that my screen is not sharing properly. Can someone put in the chat to see if you can see the current screen with Perry on the slides? All good now. Okay, perfect. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Perry. And thank you so much for joining us today. We're really looking forward to kind of hearing your experience with Unibuddy and kind of how you found bringing the kind of student voice to the forefront of your marketing and kind of recruitment activities. So what we'll kind of be discussing today, so of course, Tampere's story and hearing that is kind of the primary focus of today and the impact that bringing kind of student voice into those discussions has had. So lots of Q&A, and then I'll also be talking a little bit about the impact of Unibuddy and how you could potentially get on board with peer-to-peer as well. So you might be wondering, might be kind of less familiar with Unibuddy. I know we have a mixture of kind of different participants here today, those who aren't yet on board with Unibuddy, and I think we've got some current partners on here as well, so welcome to those. But I'll kind of set the scene a little bit of kind of what Unibuddy is and why peer-to-peer is so important, we think. So we've obviously done a little bit of research around the topic of peer-to-peer, and these are some of the statistics that we've kind of found over our kind of research. So we now know that 74% of prospective students would rather speak to a current student than a staff member. And as well, in the decision-making process for prospective students, so deciding where and what to study and potentially, what city they would enjoy studying in as an international student, 87% of that decision is actually influenced by personalized communication. So it's really about how you can put your current students and potentially alumni. Oh, sorry guys, I don't know why this is not sharing properly. I'm going to just cancel the share and then I'll redo it and see if that helps. Sorry, I think people aren't being able to see my screen properly. Okay, I think that's it. Let me know in the chat again if you can't see properly. and 1/5 of students never feel represented across student advertising. So this is, I think, most important for those that are looking to really improve their international student recruitment. But it's peer-to-peer, and Unibuddy as a platform is a fantastic way of kind of showcasing the diversity of your student population, and helping those kind of foreign students feel as though they're students like them studying at that institution, and they're likely to have a good experience as well. So that's kind of, essentially where Unibuddy comes in, and that's our kind of primary mission. So over the last 4 years or so that we've been around, our kind of main mission is to help students to make better decisions through shared human experience. So, deciding where and what to study is often kind of one of the most daunting and first big decisions that we make as young adults. And we want to make sure that students feel as well informed and kind of reassured and confident in the decision that they're making. And that's kind of what we're all about. So for those that are kind of, again, less familiar with Unibuddy, not yet using the platform, you might also be wondering, what's involved in kind of implementing Unibuddy. And I'm sure Perry is going to talk a little bit about, their experience with the platform so far and how it's been kind of getting set up with that. The good news is that Unibuddy is embedded, so it lives on your institution's website, and it's very easy to get set up. It's a single line of HTML code that's copy and pasted, and your student ambassadors, and they could be both current students and alumni, and also staff ambassadors, are available through a mobile app or through desktop. And we also integrate as well with different messaging platforms that your prospective students are likely to use, so WhatsApp, SMS. So we really hand a lot of preference over to the students in terms of how they interact with your institution through Unibuddy as well. So obviously I wanted to talk a little bit about Tampere's platform, and Perry, we're going to very shortly get into the Q&A and delve much deeper into that. But very great platform that Tampere are running. You have around 50 international, I believe, student ambassadors right now on the platform answering questions, and I believe you're very shortly going to be bringing some domestic students on there as well. So continuing those conversations from 19 different countries, which is fantastic, and nearly 1,500 chats have actually been taken place on the platform. So a really great platform, and I wanted to just quickly show, I guess, some screenshots of what some of your ambassador profile cards look like. And you will notice the kind of diversity across nationalities here as well, which is fantastic. That's what we like to see on our kind of partners platforms, as well as diversity across different courses as well. So really giving prospective students a lot of choice in terms of what ambassadors they decide to chat to. So we're going to jump straight into the Q&A portion of the webinar. So I'm going to stop sharing and kind of get going with the questions. Again, for anyone in the audience that also has some questions they'd like to ask, please do pop those in the Q&A, and we'll get to those at the end as well. So Perry, I'd like to just hand it across to you really, and hope that you can talk to us a little bit about how the last year's been for you guys at Tampere, and also, I guess, just for the kind of wider Finnish higher education industry as well.
Well, 3 things come to mind. First, the state of shock that everything is cancelled. That was the overview about a year ago. We've had to do a lot of ad hoc situations, solutions, improvise. There was a very huge digital leap, even a triple jump, a learning curve in that. So both of us as administrators and our ambassadors and our not even going to the classroom teaching, everyone's been working very hands-on and very face-to-face with prospective applicants. So we had to come up with solutions quite quickly, and sort of our advising, information, recruiting events, everything moved online in about a split second. Yeah.
Absolutely. And how, I guess, did Unibuddy really fit into the work that you've done over the last year as a result of all those changes?
I'm really happy that we had a crystal ball. So we launched Unibuddy on the 1st of March, 2020. So that sort of came at the right time. It removes automatically questions from our inboxes. So in an otherwise hectic schedule and in an improvisational situation, we were able to eliminate that 1,500 questions that you saw. answered by our student ambassadors. So that helped a lot. It removed a lot of questions from our Facebook page, from our messages, from the phone line. So it really did its job.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, one thing that is great about a Unibuddy and peer-to-peer is, again, taking that workload off kind of the admissions team, recruitment team that are dealing with emails and those kind of incoming inquiries. And also you mentioned Facebook, which I know is a solution that a lot of universities use as a way to kind of address that peer-to-peer need. But of course, you don't get the kind of visibility of what those conversations are taking place, because they're taking place obviously on a student's own kind of social media platform. But why do you feel the kind of student voice is so important in what you guys do at Tampere?
In a couple of years that we've seen a rising trend, both with your research, QS, Times Higher Education, is bringing up peer evaluations and peer voices as an important part. And we're very proud of our students. The stories that they have are unbelievable, how they ended up here, what they're doing here, and what they're doing after, so alumni stories as well. So I think that it's sort of more believable when you're thinking about the applicant side of you. If everything has a glowing review, it's not believable. We want them to bring out obstacles that they faced and overcome. So we want them to sort of give a realistic view of what it was like to study here. More from the perspective of how to overcome, of course, the obstacles, but we don't want them to hide bad experiences, because no one would believe that they had none.
Yeah, and to be fair, that is I think that's a concern that some institutions have that are considering peer-to-peer and kind of Unibuddy is, well, what if they aren't saying, always positive things? But as you mentioned, that is kind of unrealistic, and it doesn't always come across as the most authentic exchange between a current student and a prospective student.
I think we were overly cautious with that. So, I mean, we should trust our students much more. They don't want to look stupid. They don't want their institution to look stupid, because that would sort of question their life choices. So, I mean, we haven't come up across really, there's things that we would frame differently from what they say, but we haven't been worried about false information or the wrong kind of overview. So I think that we should trust them much more than we do right now.
Absolutely. And we're all gonna I've got some questions coming up about kind of how you pick the right ambassadors, because a lot of the best way that you could make the most out of Unibuddy is to obviously make sure that you're choosing wisely, and I think that certainly comes into it. So over the kind of last year, what would you say has been, I guess, your kind of most successful initiative that you've kind of implemented?
Unibuddy is right up there, because that was sort of built before all the hoopla started later in March. So we were able to just keep it going, and it took a load off. But other solutions that we found over the year are also student-based. So our virtual event service comes from our degree program in media and arts. Our media students are very happy to help us with the technical aspects of moving everything online. So they put together an internal service for us to be able to not worry about technical issues when we're doing everything online.
Absolutely. Technical issues that I've experienced myself this morning, so it just shows you. Absolutely. And what would you kind of say on the flip side has been kind of your biggest challenge? What have you found the most difficult for you and your team, obviously apart from COVID?
Well, it has to do with COVID, but not something that we can help with. It's reassuring our prospective applicants that life goes on and everything is okay. Sort of don't put your life on hold just because circumstances are what they are. So I think we didn't really have a tool before Unibuddy on voicing that thing, because those concerns and private anxieties do not come through in emails that we receive in our admissions office. So the prospects are much more likely to bring something like their worries up with student discussions. So I think it solved an issue that didn't arise until we had this up and running.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say, I guess, that you've kind of learned from that? Like what initiatives do you think that you'll continue to use, you know, as a result of the experience you've had over the last year?
Refer more questions to them. I mean, we try to sort of always say in events online that you can continue discussions with our student ambassadors through Unibuddy and show the platform and say, please choose whoever you want to speak with, and continue the discussions that we have during virtual events. So, I mean, it's hard to come up with questions on the spot when the students are in an event. So I think it's better that we give them an outlet. It works sort of like an aftercare thing for the events. I think what we've learned is that we should really rely on our students much more in everything. So we should trust them and we should rely on them.
Absolutely. They're certainly, you know, they're your best asset really in terms of, you know, for sure. And what do you think, obviously there's been a lot of debate and a lot of discussion, I think, around in the higher ed community about kind of this hybrid model between kind of digital and in person. Do you think that the future of student recruitment will be much more hybrid now after the last year?
Certainly. One of the big issues that is non-COVID related is sustainability. So that also speaks for the hybrid model. We're moving away from printed materials, so everything is moving online. We're trying to make everything accessible because of the EU directives that have come into fruition. And I think that there still needs to be some face-to-face interaction because we work in some family-centric cultures where sort of, especially for tuition fee paying students, it's the parents and the grandparents that we need to convince, and they are certainly not chatting online. So even if we convince the students, it still might take some work in those cultures. So I think it's a hybrid model. So that's pretty much the future of where things are going.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree. And I think that's a really good point about what you made. Not every audience is comfortable with that fully digital approach. So you're always going to need a bit of a mix. And I think that works really well. So kind of onto Unibuddy then. So can you talk a little bit more about your use of the platform? So a lot of institutions during these webinars ask in the chat, and they want to ask institutions like yourself, like, why did you decide to implement it? What was your kind of primary focus?
We were looking for direct access to our applicants and prospective applicants. So it was either calling, texting, emailing directly, which is a resource issue, so we can't really do that. Or developing an app. And when we had our feedback from applicants and students as well, is the last thing they need is another app. So if there's something that they can incorporate into what they're usually using, and they don't need to do anything extra, and then that was what spoke for Unibuddy as well. So apps were the other choice, and we got a strong message from our audience that they don't want another app.
Fantastic. And how have you kind of found the experience of kind of working with and recruiting student ambassadors? How has that been for you at Tampere?
It's been a joy. I mean, we've had student ambassadors for a long time. Like I said, with face-to-face events and high school visits and campus tours and things like this. So it's always nice to have new motivated students every year. We have an annual application round, of course, and we just ask anyone if they want to continue or if their life has changed and if they need to step aside for a moment or for good. And of course, some students graduate. Most of them do. So we need to sort of fill the pool now and then. And it's, well, we don't really have to cut anyone out. So usually the people that sign up for the program are outspoken and sort of positive in outlook and good representatives for their program. So we try to keep that threshold really high. So they would actually have to like break the rules to be kicked out of the program, because we don't want to go into sort of like the bold and the beautiful kind of thing, that we only choose the right ones with the traits that we want to outline. So, I mean, everyone's welcome unless they do something that they're no longer welcome.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point. Like a lot of universities are kind of, as you say, concerned about, you know, what would make a good ambassador. But what you mentioned, I think, is very true. You know, those who really put themselves, you know, out there and volunteer for a program like an ambassador program at a university and are wanting to engage in those types of conversations are likely to be those really passionate, engaged, positive students that are, you know, really hoping to just help other prospective students that kind of went through that fairly tumultuous, kind of stressful time of deciding, you know, what to study and where. So I think you make a really good point. Is there anything?
I wanted to add to that. There's also like certain human types or individual types. So some people are more likely to go in front of a high school student group and speak to them. Yeah. But more and more of our students are more comfortable online. So I think that moving online or giving them an option of doing this service online is opening the door to a whole new group of students who are not public speakers, but would love to do this advising online by chatting, for example.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point as well. And again, you know, a lot of institutions are curious to hear how other institutions kind of manage that ambassador scheme. Do you kind of incentivize or provide any kind of additional training outside of what Unibuddy provides for your ambassadors?
Yeah, we do. So everyone has to attend, after the application period, has to attend a mandatory training. Again, we don't give them direct words into their mouth what to say, but we give them guidelines. We don't want to blacklist any other institutions, so sort of do not do comparisons with others if you have experience from others. Only emphasize the good sides of our university. This type of advice and guidelines we give them.
Yeah.
And I think it's sort of it's a method of quality assurance. So sort of they have the same instructions from us and we make sure that they understand what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And we do give incentives. We've given credits, study credits before, but like we see students' curriculums are quite full, and that wasn't really working as an incentive anymore. So we moved to cash money fees, and that works better. So students will actually, even if they don't really have the motivation, they have the need to do something. So it sort of keeps a steady flow going of participants in different events, because we do give them a selection of events that they can choose to take part in. So they can do blog postings, they can do Instagram takeovers, they can do Unibuddy, they can do all sorts of things, and they pick and choose of what they want. But for Unibuddy, we thought that we would give a term-specific fee, and then we will see sort of if the load becomes too great, and then we will increase the fee, and so on.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think what kind of my experience of working with different types of institutions is that there is quite a wide array of how institutions incentivize and kind of motivate their ambassadors. And I think certainly what you've spoken about is fairly common, kind of providing monetary incentives based on number of hours spent kind of answering questions on the platform, and of course you have access to all of that data on the back end as an administrator. But also there are a lot of voluntary schemes that are around out there as well, where it's providing a hoodie for ambassadors that sign up, or access to professional development opportunities or award shows throughout the year. So there really is how long's a piece of string in terms of how you manage it. We actually have a few questions from the audience, and it's around this kind of topic, so I thought I would kind of throw them in here instead of waiting to the end. So one question is, how big of a burden or stress has the volunteering been for the students? Have you had any negative feedback from the participating current students? And then how do you recruit them and give any rewards compensation? So you've addressed that last question, but I would, ask, have you had any kind of negative feedback?
Well, not really. I mean, we can block discussions that we see that are going in sort of an inappropriate way. On the Unibuddy platform, there's a dashboard for us to keep an eye on the conversations. There's only been a couple in this year that have been, well, not inappropriate, but annoying. So some people you just never can get rid of, and they've answered the question like 16 times and you're still asking the same question. Don't know if that's a trolling issue or whatever, but we haven't actually had to block anyone. We've just advised the ambassador to ignore them, that eventually they will go away, and they have. So it's sort of, well, it's a good option to have. And I think it's a security feature for the students. I think they were very relieved that they don't have to give any of their contact information. Yeah. So the chat is not done on their own WhatsApp or on their own Facebook profile.
Yeah.
So they are protected in that way. But we haven't had to actually do anything to block any inquiries.
Yeah. That's good. I mean, that is, I would say, we recently hit a milestone at Unibuddy, so we've had over 10 million messages exchanged on the platform, which is, you know, huge. We've been celebrating that a lot this week, and I think it's, we get updated stats on these things, but I think it's 0.02% of prospective students that have asked questions on Unibuddy have had to be blocked by an administrator. So the number of those types of trolls or, you know, troublemakers is very low, and I think that's, a lot of that is because it's a platform that lives on a higher education institution's website, and there's a kind of sign up process, and we're very careful on how to manage that. So
there's easier places to troll if you want to troll.
100%, yeah. Definitely. And on the kind of burden, stress of volunteering, I think I will also add that, as you, I think, mentioned, Perry, you have the option of temporarily kind of deactivating student ambassador. Yeah. So if they're going through kind of a busy study time or exam time, maybe they're actually going off on holiday, or maybe they need a bit of a break from the platform, they're actually able to deactivate them so they're no longer receiving any of those new inquiries. Yeah. And typically we see, I think, a busy ambassador, so a busy student ambassador, spend about 1 hour a week answering inquiries. So there should never hopefully be a case where you're kind of overloaded and the stress of being an ambassador becomes too much. That's something quite rare.
Yeah, usually, I mean, their response times are quite quick. Yeah. If those were going very long, then we could ask them, you know, if you need a break or something like this. Yeah. But mostly they've been students who say, like, I'm in practical training for the next 5 months. I really can't take this up. And I'm not on campus anyway, so I can't really assist anyone. So we just say, okay, we'll put you on pause, and then you let us know when you're coming back in.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely fantastic that you can kind of manage those kinds of anomalies.
Yeah, and they're very easy to handle through the dashboard. So it's just a matter of one click of activating and deactivating.
Yeah, brilliant. And we've also had another question, again, kind of around training of ambassadors. So it was, would the student ambassador training be online, and what would the program look like? So I can hand it over to you as your kind of experience as a partner, what that training has been like for you, and then I can add my own.
First year, our training was before we launched Unibuddy, and that was actually on campus, autumn 2019, when we already had this idea of a chat service of some kind. That's when it was on campus, and we could, you know, feed everyone and give them a t-shirt and, you know, these overalls that Finnish students use, so a badge for their overall and everything. Online has been the only option this year. But we really didn't get too many negative comments about that. Actually, we had more of an attendance this year, because students said that, I mean, if this would have been on campus, I couldn't have attended because I'm working, but I could take the time off to listen to this at the same time. Yeah. And we had the same presenters. So, I mean, we have sort of a public speaking trainer there who gives them sort of like funny aspects on how to make themselves interesting, especially online. And then we have sort of a message from our management. So our vice presidents from both universities were there, just telling them how important they are to our university, and you know, how much they're valued, and how we really appreciate them volunteering for this service. Yeah. Fantastic. So it's been online, but we got more good feedback on that than negative feedback. Yeah.
Brilliant. Good. And it's brilliant that you guys run kind of your own training specifically for your ambassadors as well. we also, Unibuddy will provide training and resources as well to institutions. So I think we run, I think it's bi-weekly, but it depends on kind of demand, webinars for your ambassadors to attend as well. And we provide that training, kind of providing.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention that actually. Yeah. At the start, of course, there's really good material from Unibuddy. There's sort of a guide video and a booklet for them to sort of get acquainted with the platform.
Yeah.
And we were expecting questions. We got absolutely none. There was one technical issue, and we directed that question directly to, I think it was Poppy or you, and that was solved in a matter of minutes. So I mean, we strongly, heavily relied on the materials that you provided, and I mean, you have the expertise on what works and what doesn't. So I'm sure it's been a work in progress developing that package, but it seems to work like a dream. Yeah.
Always glad to get good feedback on the kind of training and provisions that we provide as well. Cool. Well, I'm going to get back to the Q&A. We do have a few more questions from the audience, but we'll certainly get to those at the end. So how do you currently kind of leverage the insights and data that you generate from your Unibuddy platform? How do you kind of use those and maximize those?
We do use the relevant questions sort of about application of our institution, about the process of admission. We take a look at them, and if there's anything that comes from there that we can sort of improve upon, we will take those into account. This was, of course, our first application round during having like Unibuddy online live, but we kept an eye on it so that sort of the questions before application, of course, were different. After application period, they change a little bit. So but they are what we expected them to be. More about studies after, and more about sort of student life, finances, things like this before application. So they want to first investigate the site that they're considering. And after admission, then they are more focused on how to actually complete their studies and start, and what's available in services.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really interesting to hear and see how those kind of conversations and questions change depending on where that student is in the kind of decision journey. And also, again, for those on the webinar that are kind of less familiar with the platform, we also provide kind of data and insights around themes of conversations and what they tend to center on, and you can actually filter those by where that prospective student comes from. So you can kind of see where your international foreign students, what their primary, goals and conversations are centered around versus what course they're interested in as well, which is hopefully really helpful. And how do you kind of promote the Unibuddy platform? This is actually a question that I had for you, and we've had it from the audience as well. So everyone's keen to hear how you kind of promote the Unibuddy platform to your prospective students, and have you seen a good response to that?
Yeah, I mentioned before that we use it a lot during events. So when we're attending virtual fairs or webinars and things like this, we incorporate the same ambassadors there as participants, student participants in the event. And it's part of our aftercare. So, I mean, if you want to continue discussing this with our students, you're welcome to join our platform and pick a student that you want to discuss with. And then about placing it on our website, I mean, this goes like really deep into the analytics of our website, but we use our Hotjar analytics on how many people found it. Was it easy to find? Is it too high up or too low down on the page? Is the location good? Do people find it easily? And we have done some slight adjustments with that so that we make sure that people find it. But I would say that it's usually in conjunction with something else. We have used it as such, sort of promoting the platform as an ad on, for example, Facebook in our paid visibility. Yeah. But it's usually as a part of something else. I mean, this is the topic, and if you want more information, please check with our students.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. I think I really like that idea of kind of incorporating it into events. And we've seen so many different examples of how institutions across the Nordics, but also globally, kind of using Instagram or Twitter. You mentioned Facebook as well. There's so many different ways that you can promote the platform to prospective students on those different channels. You talked a little bit about the kind of trends and the change in the types of questions that are asked on kind of pre-post application students. Have you kind of seen any changes in the types of messages on the platform, or even the types of students using the platform over the last year, kind of since COVID?
It's a shame that we actually did launch it after our application period last year.
Yeah, you haven't,
because it would have been great to have sort of a comparison between the 2020 application and then this year. But we don't have that. We can only guesstimate what would be there. But like I already mentioned, the focus changes. So when the students are generally inquisitive, which is sort of from, let's say, for the 6 months from July until December, and then in application period, they are very interested in practical issues relating to the application. And sort of final decision-making process. And then after they get the student selection results, they move on towards sort of the level of study, methods of study, and more detailed questions about accommodation, things like this.
Brilliant. And what would you say has kind of the impact that Unibuddies had on your recruitment activities? What have you kind of seen as a result since using it?
I think it complements everything nicely. So, I mean, it takes away from the aftercare need, for example, for events, because we can refer them all to please visit our students and have a chat. And I think it sort of, it's a much more personal approach. So, I mean, if you're attending an event, you're interested in the university, and then they keep bombarding you with like mailing lists and newsletters and things like this, it's sort of non-voluntary for them, and it might seem like a harassment kind of thing, especially if you sign up on everything in one event. But if you give them a choice that this is up to you, and it's sort of, you can initiate the conversation and you can choose the target that you wish to talk to. I think it's a much more sort of, let's say, customer friendly approach to applicants.
Absolutely. And I'll very shortly, I'm nearly done grilling you, Perry. I'll talk a little bit about kind of overarching impact that Unibuddies had across different institutions as well, in terms of kind of conversion, lead gen, which are a lot of the reasons why institutions are kind of keen to move to peer-to-peer as a potential option. So we talked a little bit about kind of promoting Unibuddy and different aspects of your university to prospective students, but obviously as a group of people, prospective students are kind of inundated with various digital events to attend, kind of outreach campaigns. Are you kind of differentiating your messaging to kind of make sure that you're really standing out? What are you kind of doing in that kind of arena?
Well, we've done some sort of spying on our competition, of course. So we have like colleagues of mine who go on the events that we're attending and visit our competitors' booths and sort of see what their approach is. And I would say ours is more personal because we involve students so heavily. So it's sort of from person to person instead of sort of glossy university promotional material kind of thing. So it's sort of a balancing act between being formal and informal, and something works in some cultures and some events and something doesn't. So we have to sort of make sure that it corresponds to the audience, of course. But I think our approach is much more student-centric, and we do give them sort of, it puts the ball in their court to see what's sort of going on and what they emphasize every year, and we're listening. So every time they do a presentation or something, we keep an eye and an ear on it so that we know that what sort of our audience is talking about at the moment. It might be sort of diversity issues, sort of through the Black Lives Matter, for example, thing. That showed in discussions that they wanted to know about diversity and racism. It's usually coming from them if we emphasize something.
That's great. I think that's I think one of the best ways that you can do it is really focus it on the student and, you know, what they're asking for and what they're looking to learn.
It's not the easy way out. Certainly wouldn't say, yeah. And it's not very resource friendly, but we wish to do that anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, yeah, you're right. It's not the easy way out, but certainly, you know, from an outcomes point of view, I think it's brilliant. So yeah, kudos to you. And then last question from me. So if the audience has any more questions, then please do kind of keep those coming. But to kind of wrap up, it would be great if you could talk a little bit about what the kind of next steps for Tampere. What do you think the kind of future of student recruitment looks like at Tampere, and what are your plans for kind of this year and beyond?
Well, exciting times. Like you said at the beginning, we're launching, we piloted the Unibuddy platform with our international students, so students from our degree programs in English, and now we're launching it in our domestic pool of ambassadors. So we will jump from about 50 students online to about 250. And that's going to be interesting. Yeah, because we have no experience of the domestic pool of applicants. What we know about Finns by nature is that they don't ask a lot of questions, but we'll see. We'll see if some programs stand out. Yeah. If it works better for some than it does for others, because it seems to work in the international context where it's more hierarchical. For example, they can't ask certain questions from admissions, but sometimes it feels that since in Finland we have a very low hierarchy, yeah. Students are not afraid to ask very personal questions from admissions. I mean, they don't need a student for that. Yeah. So we'll see. It might work a bit differently, and it's interesting to see how that looks. Yeah. But that'll further ease our pressure on admission services, of course, both phone lines and emails and Facebook and everything. So it's management is working on steering. So we'll see if we have some new target groups or new programs launched next year. And we'll have some new target countries possibly. So yeah, interesting times.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to seeing your domestic students on the platform, and it is something that we're seeing much more of being adopted across the Nordics, I would say, is institutions that are keen to get kind of national recruitment included in peer-to-peer and get their students, you know, excited about, you know, being a national student ambassador as well. So I think you'll have a good experience, but I'm certainly looking forward to kind of seeing how all that pans out. So I'm going to share my screen quickly again, hopefully this time slightly more successfully. To wrap up, and I think we've got a few kind of final questions from the audience as well to touch on. But a lot of the questions that I get is around how impactful Unibuddy actually is on kind of conversion of students, and that's potentially from kind of offer holder to offer accepted to enrolled. So I thought I'd kind of put some of these, I guess, case studies up that we've had from you know, different institutions, so you can kind of read through those yourselves. So it is a very powerful lead generation tool, so it is a great way you know, to promote Unibuddy on your platform, on your institution's website, and get additional inquiries and leads that you might not otherwise have found. It's a very compelling and engaging tool that generally prospective students are very keen to get engaged with. But we also see fantastic kind of offer holder to conversion and beyond into enrollment as well. So 54% of students enrolling, and that's Middlesex. We also have the same statistic, I think, from University of Western Australia. But one that we talk a lot about, and it's actually one of the first institutions that went live with Unibuddy. So Queen Mary of London, they essentially did a kind of A/B split test to test how effective Unibuddy was at, you know, boosting their kind of enrollment and conversion. So whenever they sent out their offer holder emails, they sent 50% of those emails out with a link to Unibuddy, so their offer holders could kind of click on, start chatting with their current students and alumni. And obviously the other 50% of those emails went out regularly with no kind of Unibuddy link. And they saw a 34% increase or boost in enrollment with those Unibuddy user groups. So it can have a really tangible impact on conversion as well. And also 90% of students that chat on Erasmus School of Economics platform actually go on to enroll. So oftentimes those conversations that are happening, they seem fairly kind of surface level, you know, about experience, but sometimes for some prospective students, they have one or two concerns or questions that they want a little bit of reassurance around, and oftentimes that's enough to actually kind of make the leap and go on to enroll. So thank you so much, Perry, for joining us. You know, one of our institutions that we work with in Finland, I've just put up here on the slide some of the different institutions that we work with across the Nordics. So it's brilliant to see how quickly we're kind of growing across those countries, but also the kind of global picture now after 4 years is that we're working with over 400 institutions across, you know, I think it's every few weeks we get a new country, a first institution at a new country that we're working with across a few different continents as well. So I think we're going to move to some of the final audience questions, and then Perry, you can take a break for the afternoon. So we have one question here, which is, what's your kind of favorite feature of Unibuddy? What would you say is, you know, the one thing that you value the most or get the most use out of?
I would say from the dashboard that we can measure the activity of the ambassadors. So sort of having a large pool of ambassadors and a large variety of activities, we had some trouble sort of gauging. I mean, we had an idea of who was active and who was good as an ambassador, but we didn't have an overview. And from Unibuddy, we can clearly see who does what on the platform, how many times, how fast do they answer, how much time they're spending on the platform. Of course, they're not like simple indicators and we can't read too much into them, but they do give us an overview of sort of, is our fee paid sort of in relation to that? Is that sort of right?
Yeah.
Or should it be increased or decreased, and sort of keep a general view on how long it takes, for example, them to answer our prospects. So if we would need to encourage them to be quicker, we would.
Yeah.
Running before we launched this platform. But I would say look at the applicant numbers. If a specific program needs support, and this is one good way of supporting that. So sort of start from those where you have challenges in recruitment. And those that are pulling applicants anyway are not a priority. So if you need support in some areas, start from those. Yeah. And like, I would suggest that you do the same that we did, sort of have a pilot so that you get a hang of things and gauge the idea of how your ambassadors work. And then you can sort of launch it to the wider audience, or when you're gathering up speed, then you can sort of handle bigger masses after that. Yeah. So pick the programs that need the most help, yeah. And then sort of launch a pilot. Those are my advices.
Yeah, that's good advice. And then final question is, can Unibuddy integrate with your existing website and systems, e.g. your CRM system? So I'll hand it over to you if you have any experience, and then I can, again, kind of add my own take on that as well. Do you kind of integrate Unibuddy with other tools and systems that you use?
Yeah, we were sort of afraid of this because, you know, anything that's to do with our website design and working with our IT people and webmasters is sort of daunting, but it worked out fine. I mean, like you said in the beginning in your introduction, embedding the code was quite simple. We did need help because we couldn't do that ourselves. Sort of anything working on the code side usually requires help. It was quite easy to put up, seemed to work technically fine. Anything that we provided sort of customization wise, that would work fine. So I think it's something that you just need the someone with access to the code side of your website, and it seems to be working fine. I mean, we've seen universities that you work with that have done a wider launch. For example, in each degree program page, they have a carousel of that program's ambassadors, but we haven't gone that far yet.
Yeah.
We've got about 50 international programs, and that would take forever.
Yeah.
So we're sort of have them on one ambassador site, and that seems to be working fine.
Yeah.
And then it's a matter of us sort of spreading the word that we have to just send out notices and promote it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you mentioned a good point. You know, there's a quite a wide spectrum of how our partner universities use Unibuddy and promote it. And I think you know, everyone is using Unibuddy for, you know, sometimes a different goal or purpose. They're trying to help achieve something slightly different. And there's a lot of yeah, you can customize the way you use the platform really nicely to achieve those, which is great. And on the CRM point, yes, you can integrate Unibuddy with your existing CRM system as well. So you can pull those kind of student leads and those kind of leads that you're generating on the platform into your existing CRM system.
Yeah, I forgot the question.
No, don't worry.
I think it's sort of a trauma issue, because we've been working around CRM for a long time, but we still don't have it up and running with student leads.
Yeah.
But this is, again, one of the aspects that we're bringing up. So if you're currently in negotiations with your university management about whether or not you should manage student leads through a CRM system, Unibuddy is, again, one tool that would be helpful in that way. So gathering leads and using it.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. That's all the questions. And okay. That's a lot of questions. So thank you so much for joining us, Perry. And thanks to the audience for all the questions. I hope you found kind of the last 50 minutes or so useful. And yeah, please do get in touch after today's session if you have any kind of additional questions for me as well. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you so much, everyone. I think we're gonna head off for now. Take care. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.